So she was a very broken woman when she met Prince Charles, and that was, as we all know, a terribly unhappy marriage. But she then became glamorous. She suddenly discovered her fame because she was very beautiful and very charming. He, on the other hand, couldn't find an English woman who wanted to live with him. I mean, they all fled because of his depressions and paranoia. And here is a woman, Meghan, who was his safety net, and not living in the luxury she wanted and having to obey the royal commands. She stoked constantly that he should feel aggrieved and should feel unhappy. And I think that is, in the end, why he agreed that Meghan was not going to obey any rules. She had no intention of staying, and that she was going to be a huge problem. And that was reported, obviously, to the Queen and the rest. And they realized that this was a marriage which was not going to last.
For years, the palace allowed the world to believe it understood why Meghan and Harry walked away. But according to Tom Bower, one private demand was hidden beneath the public arguments, and the most shocking part was not what Meghan allegedly wanted, but who had been kept completely in the dark. The accepted story had always seemed painfully simple. Meghan was overwhelmed. Harry was furious. The pressure became unbearable, and together they chose escape over duty. But Bower's claim threatens to tear that version apart. He suggests the departure was not merely an emotional break from royal life, but the final move in a much longer struggle over power, status, and control. By then, Buckingham Palace had survived almost everything: explosive interviews, public accusations, a deeply personal memoir, documentaries filled with anger, grief, and private memories. Each attack damaged trust, yet the monarchy continued behind its walls, answering outrage with ceremony and silence. This alleged demand was different. It was not simply a request for stronger security, kinder treatment, or greater freedom. Meghan allegedly wanted a formal guarantee, an arrangement that could permanently reshape her place within the royal system. Senior courtiers reportedly feared that granting it would weaken the authority of the crown itself. Only a small circle was said to know the full request. Advisors, senior royal figures, officials trusted to protect the institution from decisions that could not easily be reversed. Harry, however, may have understood only a softened version of what was being discussed. That possibility changes everything. Harry believed he was protecting his wife from a cold institution that refused to see her pain. He believed every closed door proved the palace had failed her. But behind those same doors, others allegedly believed Meghan was seeking something no royal newcomer had ever been promised: lasting influence without complete submission to royal control. The palace rarely rejects a threat openly. It delays. It reduces access. It moves meetings. It changes schedules. It allows silence to do what a written refusal might expose. Meghan reportedly understood this very quickly. She knew that waiting for approval could mean waiting forever. So rather than allowing the system to quietly bury her request, she allegedly began searching for a way to force a decision the palace could not avoid. And the demand did not suddenly appear in the final days before the couple left Britain. Its roots allegedly stretched back to Meghan's earliest months as a working royal, when frustration over staff and protocol began turning into deeper questions about recognition, rank, and independence. Bower's role is to connect those scattered moments, the tense conversations, the unexplained changes, the sudden distance between households, into one disturbing pattern. At the center stood Harry, trapped between the marriage he believed he was defending and a private negotiation he may never have fully understood. To understand how such a demand could be made without Harry grasping its full meaning, the story must return to the moment Meghan first discovered that royal popularity did not automatically translate into royal power. Meghan entered royal life with global attention, enormous public curiosity, and the belief that success would earn her influence. But behind palace doors, applause meant almost nothing. The hierarchy had already been written, and no amount of popularity could move her above the people the crown had chosen before she arrived. At first, the contrast was almost impossible to ignore. Crowds gathered wherever Meghan appeared. Headlines followed her every move. Charities welcomed the attention she brought, and international audiences saw a modern figure capable of carrying the monarchy into a different age. From the outside, she looked powerful. Inside the institution, however, popularity did not grant control over staff, strategy, schedules, or the royal calendar. The monarchy rewarded something else: patience, discretion, endurance, and obedience. Change was expected to move slowly. Personal ambition was meant to disappear behind duty. Meghan allegedly saw that culture as an outdated barrier, while senior courtiers believed it was the very system preventing individual fame from overpowering the crown. That difference created the first serious fracture. Meghan reportedly believed her ideas were not being delayed because they lacked value, but because older royal households feared how quickly she was gaining attention. Projects were redirected. Plans were softened. Decisions passed through layers of approval. What officials described as procedure, Meghan increasingly interpreted as deliberate containment. The comparison with William and Catherine made the imbalance harder to ignore. Their position was protected by succession. Their future authority had already been decided. Harry and Meghan could attract larger crowds or stronger headlines, but they would remain secondary because the monarchy was not built around popularity. It was built around inheritance. Harry tried to reassure her. He allegedly believed patience would bring freedom and that his family would eventually recognize Meghan's value. But he was promising change inside a structure designed to remain unequal. Soon, separate press offices, household budgets, reporting lines, and event approvals became more than administrative details. They became symbols of who held power. Meghan did not merely want permission to pursue her work, she wanted ownership of her public mission, control over her image, and protection from being repeatedly placed beneath other royals. The conflict became deeply personal when she allegedly realized Harry could not guarantee any of it. His title opened doors, but it could not overturn decisions shaped around the future king. In private, Meghan reportedly questioned why a couple with extraordinary global reach should remain dependent on an older system for money, staff, communications, and approval. An early push for independence was allegedly reduced or rejected, forcing her to consider something far more ambitious. Harry, carrying wounds from his childhood, saw every restriction through the memory of Diana. To him, limits felt like hostility. And Meghan reached a dangerous conclusion. If popularity could not change her rank inside the institution, perhaps it could become leverage outside it. But before Meghan could challenge the hierarchy openly, another battle was already unfolding in private one, involving staff, money, security, and the quiet question of who truly controlled the Sussex future. Harry believed the meetings were about protection, peace, and giving his wife room to breathe. Yet Tom Bower's alleged account suggests a second conversation was happening beneath the first one, filled with carefully chosen phrases, hidden conditions, and a future Meghan may have been defining before Harry knew there was anything to negotiate. The discussions began as attempts to solve problems that already seemed dangerously close to breaking the couple. There was relentless media pressure, growing tension inside the household, arguments involving staff, fears over security, and Meghan's deepening unhappiness with royal life. To Harry, these were not abstract concerns. They were warnings. He entered each conversation carrying the memory of Diana. Every promise of protection sounded incomplete. Every palace delay felt familiar. He was determined not to stand silently while his wife suffered beneath the same machinery he believed had once failed his mother. But while Harry reportedly asked how Meghan could be protected, Meghan's questions allegedly went further. Who would control their money? Who would approve their public statements? Could they launch projects without permission? Would they be allowed to work internationally, build partnerships, and shape a separate identity beyond palace control? Around them stood private secretaries, lawyers, advisors, and senior courtiers who understood that every word carried consequences. Independence might mean a separate office, or complete commercial freedom. Privacy might mean fewer engagements, or freedom from royal oversight. Harry was allegedly told they wanted breathing room and a more flexible working model. Yet the wider proposal reportedly contained conditions capable of changing royal tradition itself. Meghan had grown unwilling to trust verbal assurances. Staff could be replaced, public opinion could turn. The Queen's reign would eventually end. She allegedly wanted commitments strong enough to survive all three. Financial independence sounded reasonable, even admirable. But commercial freedom, combined with royal titles, created something far more powerful, a hybrid position the palace could not fully command and might struggle to remove. Outside advisors reportedly understood Meghan's international value. To them, royalty was not only a family role, it was a global platform capable of supporting media ventures, charitable partnerships, speaking opportunities, and an independent Sussex brand. Harry trusted Meghan because he believed their purpose remained shared: escape the pressure without abandoning service. What he may not have understood was how permanent the proposed shift had become. Senior palace figures began warning that this was no temporary adjustment. It could become an exception other royals would later demand. Harry was now trapped between two threats. Meghan allegedly warned that continued palace control could destroy their marriage. Courtiers warned that leaving could destroy his royal future. And the language kept changing. Autonomy became guarantees. Freedom became protected titles. Income, influence, and insulation from future interference. Then, one late-night communication reportedly exposed the true scale of the proposal. But Harry may have received only the version prepared for him. That communication would lead to the meeting where the Sussex crisis changed forever. Because the palace finally realized Meghan was not asking merely to step back, she was asking for something no senior royal believed the crown could safely surrender. Inside a private royal meeting, the atmosphere reportedly changed the moment Meghan's conditions were placed on the table. The room had expected complaints, compromises, perhaps even a temporary departure. Instead, senior figures allegedly heard the outline of a parallel royal court and realized Harry might not know what was being requested in his name. Senior royals and advisors had gathered believing they were still dealing with a family crisis that could be contained. Their purpose was supposedly clear: prevent public humiliation, calm Harry's anger, and convince Meghan that limited adjustments were possible without tearing apart the structure around them. Yet Meghan's absence from parts of the discussions created a strange tension. Whether represented by written conditions, private messages, or advisors speaking on her behalf, her influence controlled the room. Every possibility returned to the same question: what would she accept? The palace had prepared for difficult requests: a reduced workload, more time abroad, stronger protection from the press, a separate office, greater authority over charitable projects, distance from the exhausting rhythm of royal duty. These demands would have caused resistance, but they could still have been negotiated. The proposal allegedly went much further. It reportedly described a permanent arrangement in which Meghan and Harry would remain internationally recognized members of the royal family while operating with extraordinary freedom from palace command. They would keep the prestige of royalty, yet gain control over decisions the monarchy traditionally guarded. That possibility alarmed courtiers immediately. The crown could survive a prince leaving. It had endured scandal, exile, and family division before. What it feared was a prince creating a competing center of royal influence while retaining the titles, privileges, and emotional legitimacy that came from the institution itself. The alleged proposal touched everything at once: royal styling, independent communications, commercial partnerships, security, international representation, and control of a separate Sussex identity. Each matter alone might have been manageable. Combined, they created something far more dangerous, a system offering royal prestige without full royal discipline. The deepest concern was Harry. He may have heard the plan described as freedom for his family, not as a new structure challenging the future authority of William. Palace advisors allegedly began to suspect that emotional language had hidden the proposal's true scale from him. William reportedly saw the danger sharply. If the Sussexes could earn, campaign, speak, and negotiate abroad without coordination, the monarchy could appear divided between rival courts. Charles faced a crueler choice. Agreeing might keep his son close, but it could weaken the authority he was preparing to inherit. The Queen allegedly understood the historic risk at once. A half-in, half-out monarchy could create divided loyalties and confusion over who truly spoke for the crown. Officials reportedly asked whether Harry had personally approved every condition. His hesitation, anger, or defensiveness only deepened their suspicion. The proposal was then separated piece by piece. Reduced duties might be possible. Time abroad might be possible. Private income might eventually be possible. But one buried condition crossed the line. And when that buried condition was finally isolated, the palace understood why the negotiations could never end in compromise, because Meghan was allegedly demanding a protected royal empire of her own. According to Tom Bower's dramatic revelation, Meghan's secret demand was not simply freedom from royal duty. She allegedly wanted the Sussexes' guaranteed permanent status as an independent global royal household, free to earn, speak, negotiate, and build their own empire, while the crown remained responsible for their legitimacy and protection. The demand, as Bower's alleged account presents it, was a binding form of royal independence. Meghan and Harry would retain their titles, international standing, security expectations, and royal prestige, yet gain freedom from palace control over their location, public statements, commercial agreements, charitable work, and future projects. This was not merely the half-in, half-out arrangement discussed in public. That model might have been temporary, limited, and dependent on the monarch's approval. Meghan allegedly wanted something harder to reverse, a protected position that could survive changing courtiers, shifting public opinion, and even a future reign. In effect, the Sussex household would become a distinct global branch of the monarchy. It would no longer operate beneath William and Catherine, depend upon Charles, or answer to a central palace office. It would carry royal authority while controlling its own direction. To Meghan, the idea may have felt justified. She and Harry had attracted extraordinary global attention. Their popularity appeared to cross borders, generations, and cultures. Why? She allegedly questioned. Should that influence remain trapped beneath officials who seemed unable, or unwilling, to understand its value? The palace saw something far more dangerous. Senior figures reportedly viewed the proposal as an attempt to privatize royalty, taking the crown's symbolism, legitimacy, and public trust, then converting them into independent personal power. Harry may have known they wanted freedom. What he allegedly did not understand was the scale of the guarantees being sought. This was no longer only about fewer duties or a safer home for Meghan and Archie. It involved branding, revenue, communication, international representation, protected status, and insulation from future palace interference. Harry was not simply foolish. He was exhausted, furious, and terrified that remaining inside the system would cost him his marriage. When Meghan spoke of protecting our future, he may have heard safety and survival, while advisors heard authority and permanence. Meghan may have feared that explaining every condition would cause him to retreat. If Harry understood that the arrangement would be viewed as a challenge to William's future reign, he might hesitate, and hesitation could destroy the entire strategy. The alleged guarantees surrounding titles were especially important. Even if the couple lived abroad or entered commercial partnerships, the Crown would struggle to reduce their status. Security carried equal symbolic weight. Continued state protection would announce that the Sussexes remained royal figures of exceptional importance, even beyond royal command. There was also the possibility of an international role, perhaps connected to Commonwealth nations or selected territories, allowing them to represent royal influence on their own terms. The palace recognized the precedent immediately. Grant Harry such freedom, and every non-heir could eventually demand a separate royal brand. The refusal was therefore not merely personal. It was an institutional defense against a second royal power center. Only after the arrangement collapsed did Harry allegedly realize that palace officials believed he had approved every hidden condition, leaving him enraged with his family, but privately uncertain about what Meghan had promised in his name. The demand had finally been exposed, but its rejection created an even more dangerous question. What would Meghan do when she realized the palace would rather lose Harry than surrender control of the crown? The palace did not simply reject Meghan's alleged demand. It dismantled it piece by piece, stripping away the titles, freedoms, protections, and commercial advantages that would have made the Sussexes untouchable. For Meghan, it was institutional punishment. For Harry, it felt like proof that his family had chosen power over him. The royal response rested on one unmovable principle: independence could not exist without accountability. Harry and Meghan could remain working royals and accept the rules governing the crown, or they could leave and create a private future. They could not freely take the privileges of one life while claiming the freedom of the other. Every part of the proposal was narrowed. Commercial income would require distance from official duty. Royal branding would be restricted. State-funded security could not be promised wherever they chose to live. International representation would remain under the authority of the monarch and government. The language sounded technical, almost cold. Its emotional meaning was devastating. They could not keep everything. Harry allegedly saw the refusal as betrayal. He believed his family had once again placed the institution above the people inside it, denying Meghan and Archie the protection they needed. Senior royals reportedly believed the opposite. In their minds, they were stopping Harry from surrendering his future to an arrangement whose full consequences he may never have understood. Meghan's response was allegedly controlled on the surface, but decisive in private. If the palace would not approve an independent Sussex structure, she would prove that their influence could survive without permission. Then came the battle over timing. By announcing their intentions before negotiations were complete, the couple forced Buckingham Palace into public reaction. Senior figures lost the chance to shape the message quietly, and the world suddenly saw how deep the division had become. Meghan allegedly understood the force of public sympathy. A complex argument over authority, titles, money, and constitutional limits could be transformed into something far more powerful. A story about a young family escaping hostility to survive. The palace could have exposed the wider demand, but doing so would have revealed private communications and raised painful questions about Harry's knowledge. Silence protected his dignity, and protected the institution from appearing openly cruel. But silence came at a price. Each unanswered accusation darkened the palace's reputation. Charles was trapped between fatherhood and duty. Financial support might preserve contact with Harry, yet every concession risked reviving the arrangement already rejected. William's position hardened further. Once private discussions became public, trust was no longer merely damaged. It was broken. Separated from his family and familiar advisors, Harry increasingly depended on Meghan's explanation of what had happened. Yet Tom Bower's later allegation threatened that foundation. If the palace had rejected more than a plea for safety, Harry's anger might eventually turn toward the person who had defined the conflict for him. Still, the Sussexes left determined to prove the crown had underestimated them. But freedom outside the palace came with a hidden test: without royal control. Meghan could finally build the independent platform she had allegedly demanded, yet every success would also reveal what the original negotiation had truly been about. Once Meghan and Harry were outside the palace, the shape of their new life began to mirror the very arrangement royal officials had feared. There were global deals, carefully managed appearances, personal campaigns, and a separate public court raising one chilling question: had the secret demand been rejected or merely rebuilt without permission? Their post-royal world quickly took on the structure of an unofficial independent household. Media production, charitable initiatives, speaking opportunities, public campaigns, and strategic partnerships all moved through their own circle. For the first time, they controlled the message without waiting for palace approval. Meghan stepped into the authority she had allegedly been denied. She could select projects, shape announcements, limit access, and present her version of the royal conflict on her own terms. No central communications office could soften her language or delay her plans. What had once been treated as ambition inside the monarchy now became freedom outside it. Harry's role appeared very different. While Meghan focused on creating the future, Harry repeatedly returned to the past. Interviews, legal battles, accusations, and deeply personal disclosures kept pulling him toward the family he claimed to have escaped. She seemed determined to build something new. He still appeared to want acknowledgement from the world he had left behind. That difference may have exposed two separate dreams hidden inside the same departure. Meghan could have viewed their exit as the beginning of a permanent global platform. Harry may have seen it as leverage, a dramatic move that would eventually force his family to apologize, change, and welcome them back on better terms. Yet their titles remained central to the attention surrounding them. Even outside official duty, their public identities still drew emotional and commercial power from the monarchy. They could challenge royal life, speak about its private pain, and remain significant because they were still connected to the institution they criticized. This was precisely what palace officials had feared. Meghan's alleged strategy depended on controlling the meaning of their departure. They had not abandoned service. They had escaped mistreatment. They had not rejected family. They had protected their children. They had not pursued power. They had demanded freedom. Then, Tom Bower's allegation threatened to overturn that carefully protected narrative. If the original dispute had involved permanent status, commercial control, and a separate royal power base, the story no longer looked like a simple flight from suffering. The palace answered with silence and continuity. Ceremonies continued. Succession moved forward. Public duty carried on. Time slowly weakened the force of each new attack. For Harry, the situation grew more painful. The longer he remained outside, the harder it became to blame every disappointment on palace obstruction. And if he began questioning why he had never understood the full proposal, the conflict would no longer remain between two households. It would enter his marriage. Bower's alleged evidence had reached him when reconciliation with his family seemed remote and trust inside the Sussex circle mattered more than ever. And that left only one final explosion waiting to happen. The moment Harry confronted the possibility that the war he had fought against his family may have begun with a demand he never knowingly agreed to support. Harry had sacrificed his role, his home, his closest family ties, and much of his old identity, believing he was defending Meghan from a heartless institution. But if Tom Bower's revelation is true, the darkest betrayal may not have come from the palace, it may have been hidden inside the decision that changed his life. The private realization would be devastating. Harry had believed the dispute was about safety, dignity, and freedom from a system that refused to protect his family. Yet palace officials allegedly believed he had approved something far greater: a permanent structure involving royal titles, financial independence, security, international influence, and freedom from central control. If he had understood every condition, would he still have agreed? Would he have challenged Meghan, demanded changes, or refused to leave? There was no painless answer, because the consequences had already reshaped his life. He might begin replaying earlier conversations. Meghan had spoken about survival, respect, and protecting their future. But behind those emotional words, advisors were allegedly discussing guarantees, commercial power, independent communications, and a separate Sussex identity. That does not prove she deliberately deceived him. She may have simplified the proposal because she believed he was too emotionally overwhelmed to face its full meaning. She may have assumed he understood. She may have genuinely believed every condition protected their shared future. Or she may have feared that once Harry saw how the palace would interpret the demand, he would lose the courage to continue. For Harry, admitting he had not known would carry an unbearable price. It would force him to question Meghan, but also himself. His memoir, interviews, accusations, and years of conflict were built upon the belief that he understood exactly why the palace had rejected them. The monarchy would face its own moral burden. Senior figures may have suspected Harry did not grasp the full arrangement, yet they allowed him to leave rather than reveal private information that might have shattered his marriage. Their silence, once interpreted as cruelty, may have been an attempt to protect him from public humiliation. But protection through silence became another form of isolation. Harry believed he was escaping the forces that had destroyed Diana. Instead, he may have cut himself off from every person capable of challenging the story he had accepted. Meghan's alleged demand may also have come from real fear. She may have believed the monarchy would control her, reduce her influence, and eventually discard her. The desire for guarantees could have grown from insecurity as much as ambition. That is what makes Bower's allegations so dangerous. The question is no longer simply why the palace rejected Meghan. It is what the palace was actually being asked to approve. William and Charles may therefore remain distant. Knowing reconciliation without honesty could reopen every battle over status, security, access, titles, and authority. Harry now faces three impossible paths: defend Meghan's account, demand the truth and risk his marriage, or return to his family and admit the war may have been built on incomplete information. The prince who once believed he knew exactly who had betrayed him can no longer be certain, because the greatest royal secrets are not always hidden in locked vaults or sealed archives. Sometimes they survive inside a marriage, waiting for the one person who trusted completely to finally ask what was done in his name.